I'm predicting we're gonna lose light about halfway through this video. I just got done filming one of my videos for next week, and I just feel like I'm questioning my entire existence right now. So I'm gonna do something that's normal, and I'm gonna read another scary story for you guys. My hair got a little wet during the last video, so if it looks a little fuzzy or a little interesting, that's why. But we're gonna try to ignore that. We're just gonna read. This is going to be part 2 to last week's scary story, so if you haven't seen that video, go watch it, or this is gonna make no fucking sense. I will have that link down below. I will also have the story and the author link down below, so all the fun links. But anyways, this is going to be, I think there's a ghost in my home, and that's not even the scary part 2. I don't want to waste any time getting you guys updated. Part of me feels like I don't have the time to waste. I've been feeling so strange the last few days. I think I'm overwhelmed with everything I found out, and some other things that I can't yet explain. I almost feel like I'm on a loop, this never-ending nightmare. And of course I haven't been sleeping either. So I did some research, and it wasn't easy. For some reason, all of the news and information of the woman who was murdered 6 months ago has been kept sealed pretty tightly. My guess is because she had told the police that she heard someone in her home, and they did nothing. Also, out of respect for this woman and her family, I'm not going to post her real name. The last thing I'm sure her family wants is a bunch of people digging around in their loved one's murder story. So for now, we'll call her Jane. Here's what I found out. She was 29 years old, the same age as me. Average build and height, dark brown hair, single, no children, thank God. I feel like I'm describing myself. It gives me the chills. Nothing in particular about her career that would make her a target to this psychopath. She had been stabbed 88 times. 88. Let that number sink in. The police initially described it as the type of killing that was personal, that she probably knew her killer, but after I put all the pieces I found together, I believe it to be random. Of course, after my experience, the part that I was the most interested in was the voice that she had heard. It was a woman's voice. She was very clear about that. I heard a woman's voice several nights in a row before the encounter with the man, and his voice resembled nothing close to a woman's voice. Here's where I lucked out. I have a friend who works at City Hall, in the legal department. She works for the prosecutor. Granted, her resources are limited, they're substantially greater than mine alone, and she was willing to help me out. She had access to the police report that was filed the night before the murder. Most of the details aren't that revealing. She heard the woman's voice, she claimed she had never heard it prior, and obviously never heard it again. They never, even after the murder, discovered signs of an attempted or successful break-in. Not like the scratches on the lock of my back door. They concluded that she knew her attacker, and she let them in. But what the police failed to tell me, that they failed to tell the poor woman who lost her life, was that 6 months prior to Jane's murder, there was another. I know they must have made some type of connection, because they thought about it enough to put it in the police report. Granted, the details were different. The woman was in her 30s, blonde, and she had been strangled. But there was one similarity. The voice. The blonde woman had reported on 2 separate nights before her death that she had heard the sound of a woman's voice in her home. Unfortunately, that was all I could dig up about that case. I'm not even sure what she said in her home, but I found it strange that of 3 women, myself included, with no relation to one another, that we would all have a similar experience, and 2 of us ended up dead. Now, I knew the gory details, but I had no explanation for the voice. I began digging more, reaching even, for any sort of explanation. I wondered if the woman's voice was that of a female accomplice, and the 2 were some sort of sick, twisted couple that got off on murdering defenseless women. I even conjured up the idea that the man was not a man at all, but a woman that could disguise her voice. It seemed more logical to me than the other way around because the woman's voice was way too natural. Just for fun, I thought maybe I was dealing with a psychotic ventriloquist. Finally, in a last desperate attempt for an explanation, I thought maybe my house was haunted. Haunted by a friendly ghost looking out for me for some reason. Every single idea sounded crazy in my head, and even crazier as I typed them out now. But I know I didn't imagine the voice, and I was starting to feel like that voice is the reason I was alive. But the 2 other women had not been so fortunate. I had one option that I could think to explore. I had to talk to the victim's family. I got a lot of resistance from my friend who worked in the legal department, but eventually I got her to get me the names of Jane's intermediate surviving family members. Her parents were alive and lived in my town, as did one sister. I was on my own to do the rest of the work and find out where I could locate her family and talk to them. Thankfully, the internet makes that easy enough. I went to her parents' home first. I had decided my best course of action was to be honest. I somehow summoned the courage to knock on their front door. A small woman answered the door. She was not what I would define as a little old lady. She was more like mid-60s. She actually reminded me a bit of my mom. I opened with an apology for disturbing her, and I introduced myself. I told her that I had heard about the tragedy that happened to her daughter. I gave the briefest explanation of my experience that I could while standing on her front porch. She slowly opened the screen and motioned me in. I followed her to a fairly large-sized open living room. Everything was neat and organized, and the decor was surprisingly modern. She asked me what exactly it was that I wanted to know and how I thought it would help. I told her. The police told me that Jane had heard a voice in her home the night before the incident. Yeah, she told us about it, her mother replied. The silence was deafening. Did she mention anything strange about it? I asked. I got a piercing stare from her. I sat for a brief moment waiting for a reply, and I happened to glance over her shoulder and notice a photo that had to have been of Jane. She did look eerily like me. Not in a twin sort of way, but in a type sort of way. I got the chills. They seemed to be coming to me often since my experience. I was his type. Finally, she replied, You mean stranger than hearing a disembodied voice? No, I think that's the strangest part. I knew I wasn't going to get anywhere with the mother, and I didn't even ask if Jane's father was home. I did ask, though, if Jane's sister would be willing to talk to me. She said I could try and gave me an address. I wasted no time on the chance that she would be home in the middle of the day, and I headed for Jane's sister's home. I sat outside of her house in my car for a good 30 minutes before going in. I thought, what the hell am I doing? Who do I think I am? Sherlock Holmes? How am I trying to solve a murder mystery that police can't even solve? Going to the family of the deceased seeking answers. I will tell you what, though. The will to survive is strong. It's no wonder they call it survival instinct, because I was so terrified that I was willing to stop at nothing to try and get some sort of explanation. Hopefully some answers that could help me find the man that promised to come back for me. Finally, I got out and knocked on the front door. Luck would be on my side again. I heard steps getting louder, coming towards the door. I heard the click of the locks, and finally the door opened. What I saw almost made me run away. It was Jane. How could this be? I was looking at a dead woman. She just stared back at me and asked, May I help you? The voice. It was the voice. The woman in my home. It was her. I will never in my life forget that voice. It was attached to a woman who was supposed to be dead. You look... I'm sorry. Oh my God. I was a bumbling idiot. She opened the screen door. Come in. I think I have some things to explain to you. I followed her in. She offered me a drink, but I declined. Jane? I asked. No, Jane was my twin sister. My heart skipped a beat. It was a skip of relief. I apologized. Our conversation was short-lived. None of her family particularly wanted to talk about it, but she had told me that she was thankful I'd survived my attack, and that it was eerie that I also heard the voice. She also gave me a gem of information. Her sister had confided in her days before the murder that she was hearing voices in her home. They would only speak locations in her home, just like what I heard. Jane had been more clever than me, though. Her sister informed me that Jane had sought out a medium. She had believed that the voice she was hearing was that of a ghost. Jane's sister told me that she didn't believe in that stuff personally, but that Jane was a firm believer in it. She gave me the name and the phone number of the medium, and I was on my way. I know what you must be thinking. A freaking medium? Probably some batshit crazy lady that makes her living off of lucky guesses and the vulnerable nature of grieving people. But like I said before, I was desperate. I called the medium and explained to her my situation. She was more than willing to talk to me, and we established a meeting time in a place at a local coffee shop. I'll save you the majority of the details of this conversation because I sat there skeptical myself for almost the entire time until she told me that she had made contact with an entity in Jane's home. An angry woman. The medium didn't know if she was angry at Jane or what, but she had suffered a violent death and was angry enough to make contact with Jane. The thing that startled me the most about what the medium told me was when she described the entity to me. She said her voice was raspy, like someone who had been screaming. She also said that the woman was young and blonde. Here came the chills again. A raspy voice, like maybe that of somebody who had been strangled. Have you ever had something just click before, like trying to solve a math equation and you're about to pull your hair out, but suddenly the answer comes to you and you're right? That was the feeling I had. I knew exactly what was going on. I don't care how crazy it sounds. There was no other explanation. The voice of the woman that Jane heard had belonged to the woman who was murdered 6 months before Jane. She fit the bill. Blonde hair, young, raspy voice. I imagine your voice doesn't sound too great after you have the life choked out of you. And Jane. The voice I would never forget. Hearing it come out of her twin sister was one of the most bizarre experiences I've had, but I knew it now more than ever. The voice in my home? It was Jane. Somehow these women had been trying to warn each other, then warn me that somebody was coming. I knew it meant that the man who came into my home had to be the man who took these women's lives. Finding all this out and putting the pieces together had exhausted me. I thought long and hard about what to do. I drove home contemplating changing course and heading straight for the police department, but what would I tell them? That I knew the man who had come into my home had murdered the other two, and I knew this because of a ghost? They would commit me. I drove home and decided I would do nothing for the night. I needed to rest. As I was driving down my street, I noticed the police detail was gone. Great. Now I was all alone, with this brand new information, and my home was probably haunted. Upon entering my home, the alarm voice sounded off. Front door. Part of me didn't even want to hear that stupid voice anymore, but how could I shut off the alarm now? I didn't even bother to eat. I just set the alarm and headed to bed. She slept soundly for what seemed like most of the night and woke up not to a noise, but to a feeling. The cold. A light, cool breeze. She sat up in bed and noticed that the curtains covering the bedroom window were blowing. It was still closed, but she knew immediately that the window was open. This startled her, and she was awake now, and alert. She grabbed the bat that she now kept next to the bed and made a beeline for the window. Pulling the curtain back, she let out a gasp, realizing that the screen was gone. Turning around in a frenzy, she saw the unmistakable silhouette of a very large person. It was him, making good on his word to come back for her. It's unknown how he got into the house without setting off the alarm, but that didn't matter. He was there, in her bedroom. Something came over her, adrenaline maybe, and she charged at him, bat ready to swing. Letting out a scream like a warrior, she rushed him and swung. Contact. Unfortunately, the bat had only contacted with his arm. She was trying to put up a fight, and that's when it became visible. A gleam of light hit the blade of his knife, just long enough to be seen right before he swung at her. He managed to get a slice into her shoulder. Flight instinct must have kicked in because she ran and made it to the top of the stairs before he swung at her again. This time, slicing her on the back. It was enough to send her over the edge of the stairs, rolling until she hit the ground and lost consciousness. She woke up looking dazed, and still visibly reeling in pain. She laid on the ground for several minutes, looking confused. Not so much from being knocked out, but because of her surroundings. She didn't recognize them. It was dark, but there was faint light, enough to show the unfamiliar territory that she was in. Slowly, she sat up, asking herself aloud if she had been kidnapped, looking around for blood, but seeing none. She staggered up, using the wall as support. When she finally came to her feet, she heard something. It was an unmistakable sound amidst the quiet that filled the home. I could hear it through her as she heard it. It was the sound of glass shattering, faintly, like it was muffled, but it was clear what it was. I could see her beginning to panic, frantically looking around. It was like she looked directly at me. She opened her mouth to speak, and that's when the words came out. After she said them, a look of sheer terror washed over her face as she realized what had become of her. The words she spoke. Guest room window. This is Mary. I'm the medium. I apologize for any confusion. When I heard about her death, I knew I had to come over and try to make contact. That is when I discovered her laptop sitting on the desk. The story already started. I felt it was important to finish it, in her words. I regret that I cannot offer much more information. The police have finished their investigation here, and the home is being cleared out. Take care. Oh my fucking god. Are you kidding me? Do you know how hard it is to try and not react while you're reading that? All I want to do is like share my input, but I fucking can't do it until the end and I'm just like in shock. What the fuck? Oh my god, I'm so glad that I continued reading this. This is amazing. God, I don't understand. I say it all the time, but I don't understand how you people write these stories. I wish I was talented. I hope you guys enjoyed this story. I honestly think that this is probably one of my favorite stories that I've read so far. If you guys have any other stories you want me to read, go ahead and send them to me. I always have my social media link down below. I'm also impressed that we didn't lose light, but okay, I will see you guys in the next one. Bye. I'm getting so much better at reading these. When I first started this series, I would stumble and stutter so much that I would have to re-say sentences like 10 times each. I got through that with probably only stuttering twice throughout the whole thing. Yeet!